Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being with us. My name is Dustin Schlafly, Director of Customer Engagement for Nex-Tech, and kind of in a nutshell, my role today is I oversee kind of all marketing activity for Nex-Tech, and then our agency side of the business and our customer sales team. And I have been with Nex-Tech for about 27 years, if you can believe that. So I can't believe it some days. So I am going to trump one little thing that Jody said today. Typically, we try to be about 15 to 20 minutes. I will tell you, those of you who know me, or you'll learn quickly, I love to talk about marketing metrics and numbers related to campaigns. So I do have a little bit more content than some of the sessions in the past, so we may run about the 24-minute mark. So we'll still try to have questions at the end. If you need to jump off, please do so. But we'll stay on for questions after that. You can come back and watch the recording later. So I just wanted to let everybody know that. Again, I love to put this stuff together. So as I was putting together, I wanted to share. So Jody introduced the title of the session a little bit, as a nutshell, looking at marketing metrics and the numbers that us in the broadband industry should really be looking at. So as I was putting this session together a couple months ago, as I started thinking about it, Jody helped me a little bit, but I was actually going to the NTCA Marketing and Sales Conference. And one of the things I actually did at this conference, I actually helped one of the curbside consultation sessions. So if some of you were there, I may have visited with you or you may have heard this, but leading up to this, we put a little survey together to kind of compile some data, because I was really interested in seeing what marketers, my peers in the industry, kind of their wants and needs were as far as marketing metrics, what they want to be tracking, but also things that they were tracking today. So that's where a lot of my content from the session today really come from. So I'm going to start off, the first couple slides are just kind of a recap of what I learned from the data. But really, there was about, from the sessions that we did, there was about 45 people that participated in the survey, which I thought was great. Overall, those ones in the top turquoise there are really the ones that are leading the pack as far as what customers are tracking today, which is churn, net promoter score, and average revenue per customer. I'm going to talk about two of those specifically today, churn and net promoter score. The other thing that there was a lot of interest in is customer acquisition cost and also customer lifetime value. And I'm actually going to blend those in at the end a little bit with some ROI conversation and talk about that at the end. So some other kind of gaps, I guess, in looking at the data. Marketers really want to look at CLV and the CAC by segment, which could really be by town, it could be by age, could be by multiple different segments of the market. Another thing that they're really looking for that they don't have today is churn alerts and a way to basically predict churn of customers. There's lots of manual processes to get to some of these reports, and I'll be on the forefront of that. Some of our processes that I'm going to share with you here that we go through at Nex-Tech to get to some of these reports are manual as well too. There's some automated piece of it, but there are some manual pieces. We are going through a system transition, so maybe next year at this time I can talk to you again about how great our automated system is. Hopefully, I'm crossing my fingers. Also, being able to segment markets and look at some of these different reports and segmentation is highly desired by many of these marketers. And the other big one that I took away from this is many teams somewhat know, they know what they need, but sometimes they don't have it yet. Maybe could be to limitations, to billing systems, to tracking mechanisms. But the one thing I want everybody to take away from this as looking at metrics and being in a marketing role of some type is the biggest, takeaway from a campaign. You're not going to know success or failure of a campaign unless you're tracking some kind of a metric. So, I guess my comment is don't make it overcomplicated if you're trying to get into some of this as a newbie getting into it and working on it. But again, you're not going to know if you're successful or not successful if you're not having some kind of a metric or tracking in place. Some metrics in practice. Most teams are looking at churn and they look at it on a monthly basis, and I'll show you that and also show you annually. About 40% of the respondents in looking at churn or customers that are dropping. About 40% can't re-engage those drop customers once they've left. And only, this was, I thought, really interesting, but overall 56% of the teams share those metrics company-wide as a goal. And to me, that's something we should all look at trying to change as much as we can and being transparent throughout our companies. We all have very broad, lofty goals to gain new customers and new revenue. And to me, there's lots of people within our teams that are responsible for that. So sharing those goals to me is very important. All right, we are going to dig into, and I got churn first on the list. So basically, churn, what is it? It basically is a simple calculation, but it's really a percent of customers that disconnect or cancel your service over a period of time. So in the broadband specific sector, it's basically your customers lost divided by your total customers could be your monthly or annual churn. So again, this is one of those things that this is one of those reports internally. Parts of this are automated. I can get the monthly counts very easily, but compiling it all into one report is a manual process. So I just put a snippet of what our churn report looks like. And this, we actually track it by core services, which would be cable, video, phone, and long distance, kind of our core services in one report that we look at, the total core services. So I basically cut off the top here just to show you the cable version. And again, cable is a high churn rate. It always has been for us. It continues because we know it's a service that people are disconnecting more. And if you'll actually see those numbers in December of 24, they're really high. We actually went through a video transition. So we did lose more than average or more than normal amount of customers during that period of time. But as you can see, it's a very simple calculation, just looking at the number of disconnects in a month, basically looking at your total counts for the month. So why we track revenue, it basically can help look at customer dissatisfaction or competitive threats. It can impact revenue stability as long term as well too. So if you're decreasing a lot of or losing a lot of customers, you're going to, of course, reduce your revenue, and it actually helps forecast demand and customer lifetime value as well too. So really looking at high churn, if you have high churn, it can be marketing inefficiency, because if you're just gaining customers to lose customers, it's really wasted customer acquisition cost. And then it can help identify trends and improve retention over time. Just some kind of industry stats that I dug out, typically in a broadband market. And again, this is looking at lots of national companies. And I think we all know that the national providers probably have more churn than some of the local providers like ourselves. So typically it's about 1.5 to 3.5% churn per month. I would say a good benchmarking target for me would be to be under 2% as far as monthly churn. And as far as like broadband goes, we really try to be under the 1% mark for broadband churn. Video is typically a little bit higher, and telephone is higher as well too for us. So what do we do with the data? Once you have some churn data, what's metrics or things that you can do with that data? So one of the things that we do, we actually have a company dashboard that we have about 10 or 11 company goals every year that we work to strive for. And one of the things that drives our employees to really work to serve the customer, to keep those numbers high, is that we actually have a bonus program that's tied to meeting those goals. So as you can see, number 2 on the list right there is the core service goal, and that 13% is actually all of the core services, and that's the annual churn goal that we're looking at. So through Q1, we were trending at about 12.09, which was a really good number. Again, retention and a save plan is another thing that we use with this data. So this other screenshot that I have below on the screen, so for our front end, our customer sales team, the churn actually goes back to part of their goals that they work on throughout the year. So this is a screenshot from our ADP system where we track their goals per CSR. But one of their goals in helping with that churn is we actually have a save program, and we expect a CSR to have at least 3 save attempts per month with 1 successful save throughout the year. Now, we all realize that there are attempts out there that you're not really ever going to meet. Like if a deceased customer moving out of area. Those are ones that we don't really expect the CSR to try, but if it could be an unhappy customer, a price situation, we have metrics in place that those CSRs can use to help keep those customers. The other piece that we use this for is for trending, for budget planning, specifically on broadband. One of the things that we know, because we have this history, years of history of this, is we serve a large market, specifically here in Hayes, where I'm located, and then also our Great Bend market, that both are college communities. So we see a lot of churn typically in the month of May, and in the month of December, when we see those students leave because of graduation, moving out of the area. So we just know over time we're going to trend and see that history. So it's good for budget planning purposes to know those numbers are going to dip during those months. All right, the next one we're going to talk about is Net Promoter Score. This has really been a hot subject and topic, really probably in the broadband sector for the last 3 to 5 years specifically. So if you're not familiar with it, some of you probably are. It's called Net Promoter Score. It's basically a customer loyalty metric that measures how likely your customers are to recommend your brand to others. And I'll get into the scoring mechanism here in a little bit, but it basically measures customer satisfaction and loyalty, kind of the sentiment or how people feel about your brand. It can be used as a predictive indicator for growth. If you have a large or high Net Promoter Score, it can indicate that you're going to grow quickly. Why it's important, it's very easy to track. It's a really quick survey. It's an easy survey. It kind of identifies segments, who are the promoters, passives, and detractors within your customer base. It can also help prioritize improvements. And basically, a high Net Promoter Score basically can equate to more people referring customers to your services and also lowering your churn. So how to calculate Net Promoter? So basically, it's a 0 to 10 scale. Basically, the typical question is typically like, if you had to refer Nex-Tech, how likely are you to refer Nex-Tech to a friend? So basically, the highest scores are basically what we consider promoters, which is a 9 or a 10 score. Detractors are basically the 0 to 6s, and then your 7, your 8s are basically what we consider a passive. They don't really count into the scoring. I think the one key indicator about this, and as we launched it at Nex-Tech, that I really had to coach the board and coach the team and the leadership, is the scoring for Net Promoter is a little bit different than a normal score. So like our typical Net Promoter Score for Nex-Tech is typically around 70. So back in the day, my kids would have brought home a test and they would have scored a 70 on it, I would have said, man, you didn't do very good on that test. But in the Net Promoter Score world, it's really a negative 100 to a positive 100. So a 70 score is actually considered really, really good. So that's one of the things, if you're going to launch this or you're working on it and working with your employer and your team members, just to coach them what those numbers actually equate to, so they understand the scoring mechanism and the value of those numbers. All right, let's go on here. All right, so kind of the process that we use at Nex-Tech, and I know there's some Nex-Tech team members on here, so I'll caveat this. We are in our system transition. We are going to transition a little bit the way we're using this survey. So I've actually put the new way that we'll be using the survey tool going forward. But today it's a transactional Net Promoter Score, and that will be the same going forward. Which will basically, what I mean transactional, some kind of an instance happening that triggers the survey. So in the new build that we're working on, basically what will happen is once an install is done, phone, internet, TV, whatever it could be, 3 days after the install is done, it will trigger this survey response to the customer. The other trigger that will happen in the system is a trouble ticket. So customer calls in, their video is not working or internet or whatever. We have to submit a trouble ticket. A tech goes out on site to help the customer. The next day after that ticket is closed, it will also trigger one of these responses going out to the customer. So we actually use a pretty, I'm going to say, but intricate system. It's called Listen 360. We implemented it probably about 8 or 9 years ago. For the most part, this is a barely automated system. The information dumps from our billing system daily to get the piece going, and pretty much we don't have to touch it from that point out. But this is just kind of a snapshot of what kind of some of the dashboards look like. You can see the Net Promoter Score here. We have it divided by region of the company, west and north. These are customers considered at risk. So it is a great system with a lot of bells and whistles and tools, but I'll show you a different option as well. As far as the ownership and follow-up, I actually put in here what a survey that comes back with a poor score on it, so a 5. So basically, we have customer service supervisors, our field ops supervisors, and our help desk that are kind of the first point of contact for, I'm going to say, initiating contact or response to these surveys. There is a daily email that comes out to the supervisor group with kind of a recap of what have happened, but there is also an email notification that comes out immediately if there's a detractor response to the system. So in this instance, this detractor response would have came out. It would have been one of those supervisors that I mentioned before to follow up with that customer, see if there's an issue, see if we can help resolve the issue and get to the bottom of the problem with the customer. So again, like I said, ours is a pretty complex system with multi different levels. So this is actually a system, we actually developed this for LTC Connect probably 3 or 4 years ago at least. Maybe it's been a little bit longer than that. But this is actually, this is kind of one of the segments within the dashboard that we created for them. So their NPS report flows into their dashboard. They can see it. And I'll be quite honest, they have a phenomenal Net Promoter Score, really, really good. But the top right hand, just as a quick indicator, there's just a little bit different. They ask some leading questions up to it, but you can see here in this bar right here, this is where they have the 0 to 10 scale for the Net Promoter Score rating for theirs. So typical, if you kind of look at nationwide average for broadband providers, typically a pretty good and average score, again, with a lot of national providers mixed in there, is anywhere from 0 to 20. So typically anything above 30 for like a broadband company is considered outstanding, and really 50 or more is typically rare or what we consider niche markets. And I would consider ours a lot of these rural areas that we have very niche markets here. So what do we do with the data? Again, we use Net Promoter Score on our performance goal overall as the company. That's one of the metrics we look at. One of the other things that we've done with it is use a lot of these great campaigns or a lot of these great comments that we get. We have an awesome social media campaign that puts these out in front of our customer base all the time. So people are saying, others are saying what our customers are hearing about us. The other thing that's very interesting to see is tracking new fiber areas. So over the last 5 to 6 years, we've been in a big deployment of fiber in new areas. So this is looking at historical customer information. It was trending at about a 69, but if you look at some of our new build areas, we're trending at a 79%. So this was actually an interesting fact when I did the presentation at NTCA. I actually heard this a lot from others. It typically, and is a kind of a standard, that your older customers aren't typically as happy with you sometimes. Maybe they've been with you longer, they've experienced price increases or just some growth and different things. So that's one of the segmentation things that I talked about earlier that I think is really good to be able to track if you can pull out and see that by segment, by market, but also by length or longevity of the customer. The other thing, because of the Less Than 360 system that we do that I really like, it's able to integrate with our online reviews. So if you do a search for like Nex-Tech Haze, you'll see this little snippet here that it pulls those reviews into that Google listing online. All right. So kind of to wrap up the talk about metrics, I have a couple follow-up slides here that I want to talk about, just a little bit about ROI, because I think that's a big one that really everybody needs to be looking at. And again, I want to hit home that tracking is the key to this. It doesn't have to be super complex, but I'll get into that here in a second. Customer acquisition cost and also customer lifetime value. So really ROI just really looks at the effectiveness of your campaigns and your marketing and customer growth. Really high ROI equals campaigns that drive real value to your marketing efforts. Customer acquisition cost, I think, is pretty simplistic for the most part. It shows how much you're spending to gain a new customer. It can be key in really managing your marketing efforts and your spend and your profitability on those campaigns. And then the customer lifetime value. This, I think, has really been a hot topic over the last several years of trying to calculate how to do it. And again, I'll show you something that we've done at the end. We keep it very simple at this point. I think there's a lot of complexity that you can get into this. If you have a way to delve into your system and figure out the true average length of a customer, that'd probably be ideal. But I think a simple starting factor is probably the best way to do this. So again, there's all ways that you can do an ROI. We do them for customers all the time. So this is a nice graphical representation that customers can share with their board or leadership or where they may need it. So this is this is our calculation tool that we use. And I ask the team to typically do this on larger campaigns or especially our quarterly campaigns. So again, some key data elements within the ROI, of course, is your marketing spend. So I think all of us are probably hopefully tracking this at some point, but those would equate to any of your spend that you have for digital, radio, TV, direct mail, whatever. Those would fall in to the ROI tracking tool. We talked a little bit about customer acquisition costs. So in our ROI model that we do, we kind of actually have it at two levels. So we actually take the costs and we look at the leads that we're generating from the campaign. So we're actually able to get a cost per lead. And then of the leads that actually convert to a sale, then we're actually to see the new customers. And actually in this case, we're spending about $103 per customer to get a new customer based on the campaign expenses. Again, revenue, again, that's a big piece of it. So right here in the middle, we're looking at revenue for those customers. So we have one price for broadband. So it's very easy for us to calculate that. And then we have an 82% based on our cost of goods sold for internet. Our gross margin is about 82%. So we use that in the calculation for revenue for the customer. And then equating that to about a year, it's about $760. Again, this isn't something that you have to put in the ROI model, but it's good if you have it. Any of the UTM tags, source tracking, conversion rates. So as you can see down here in the results section, we have the Facebook metrics, Google impressions, and some of the other crowd fiber and orders that are coming into the system, some of the metrics for the campaign. And then of course, the big thing, the time frame, how long did it run? And then the payback period. So really looking at the payback period, this campaign is really equals to a 506% ROI. Really zero is basically neutral, kind of break even. So what this model really tells us is for every marketing dollar that I spend on this campaign, I'm expected to get about $5.06 back on that return. So I think if I'm going to spend $1 and get $5 back, that's a pretty good return for the investment on a campaign. So the last one that I'll leave you with here is this lifetime value. Again, this is a very simple model, but we've built this into our dashboard just to kind of get a number to look at. And again, that metric may change based on how you want to calculate it. If you're going to use a 3-year term for a customer, if you truly want to delve in and figure out how long your customers are staying. So just really simply, this is looking at, we've done 1,378 new installs of broadband this year at $69. Our monthly revenue coming in from those customers is $95,000, $3.4 million. If you look at the lifetime value of a customer being 36 months or 3 years. Alrighty, I shared a lot of information with you, a lot of numbers. You probably know by now that I like to talk about numbers, and I could probably talk about this for hours if you wanted me to.